Hello and welcome to the Providence College podcast. I'm your host, Matt Chittum. I am joined by our producer and PC videographer, Chris Judge, class of 05. As a major gift officer at Providence College, I've met hundreds of fascinating members of the PC community, and I'm excited to share some of their stories with you. Today's show features Bob Driscoll, Associate Vice President and Director of Athletics at Providence College. Bob has been at PC for 15 years and has helped steward PC athletics through a period of success unrivaled in the school's history. And with that, thank you, Bob, for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here, Matt. I'm not sure I'm one of your fascinating guests, but it's an honor to be here.
Well, I think, given your position, it's obviously very outward-facing. People who follow Providence College, specifically Providence College athletics, know you and probably have heard you speak in a variety of different ways. And I think this is a great way of kind of peeling back the layers and getting a good look at what you do on a day-to-day basis and how you view the college landscape in PC in particular. However, before we get into that, as a D3 athlete, you played hockey and hockey and baseball. You went to Ithaca College in upstate New York. For you, why did you end up deciding to go the D3 route as opposed to, say, going to a bigger school or a Division I school? Just walk me through that process for you.
Sure. Well, actually, I'm so old, D3, D2, and D1 didn't exist back then. It was college and university level. And I was going to go to Boston University to play football or go to Ithaca College, and they'd allow me to play baseball and ice hockey. And I was a three-sport athlete in high school, and I wanted to play two sports. And when I visited Ithaca at the time, it was one of the top physical education schools in the country. It was Springfield and Ithaca. And my vision and dream as a young person was either be a professional athlete or being a high school coach and teacher, because those were my mentors. And so I went to upstate New York and played baseball and ice hockey and studied physical education. And I got my master's degree in sports psychology, so I got a great grounding in terms of sport. Wasn't good enough to be a pro athlete, but continued my dream to be a coach and ultimately an athletic director.
So when you're at Ithaca and you're juggling two sports, and obviously Ithaca is a very good school, and as you just mentioned, they had an excellent physical education program. Were there times where juggling the athletic and academic pieces together were a struggle, or just walk me through the process of deciding to stay with both sports through the 4 years? Because that can be a tough choice at times for some athletes.
I wasn't a great student coming out of high school. I was a really good athlete, but grew up in a working class family. My dad fought in World War II. My mom cleaned houses. My dad was a truck driver. So no one in my family had ever been to college. So when I got there, I was intrinsically motivated to be successful because I didn't want to let the people down that invested in me. So I was really, really disciplined. I mean, I had my fun, trust me, but I went to the library every day. I worked out 2 or 3 hours a day. I mean, I was focused and disciplined the entire time I was there because I had a bigger dream. And I think that focus and discipline that I learned through sport is something I've kept throughout my life, and it's why I've been able to do this for 41 years and have some degree of success.
So you had this dream of professional athletics or going back and kind of mimicking some of your role models back in high school. Yet when you graduated, you kind of went into the college ranks in terms of coaching and then later in terms of administration. Yeah. So why did you kind of veer off that path that you had originally laid out?
Well, life is fluid, and what's ironic about it is there's these opportunities that are presented to you that you don't think are opportunities at the time. They're disappointments. And I was the captain of the team, the leading scorer for 3 successive years, and I was promised the internship to be the GA in the ice hockey program, and they hired a new coach, and they gave that position to his brother, who was a great player at St. Lawrence, and the only GA position left was to be in intramurals and recreation, which I wanted nothing to do with. But ironically, I took that position. It was my first exposure to administration, so I ran the intramural recreation programs as a 21-year-old male. And then when I applied for all these high school jobs, when I got out, there were no jobs available. So the only job that I applied for, that I got an interview for, was the first time intramural recreation director at Union College in Schenectady, New York. And I picked up the phone and called this guy. I said, I'll be there tomorrow. I drove down on a Saturday, He interviewed me. He hired me for the job. So I had no dream of being at the college level. Mm-hmm. This was the job they offered me. And the great thing about that, it was a Division III program. And within the 6-year period of time, because I was highly motivated, I ended up being an assistant AD. I ended up being the head hockey coach, the head baseball coach. I ran their summer programs. I learned everything I could in a 6-year window of time. But if it wasn't for that internship at Ithaca, I never would have got the job at Union. I wouldn't be sitting here today. Oh,
that's interesting, because you always hear about, if you set a plan, you stick to the plan, don't let anything stop you from achieving your goals. And yet, while that's certainly a valid and times inspiring message, it doesn't always resonate with reality. And you kind of, you take a path and you go from here and go from there. So you're a former college athlete. You're now coaching 2 sports at Union, mm-hmm. which has a decorated athletic program in a variety of sports. Yet you kind of stick towards the administrative side. So why not just stick with the coaching and kind of go that route up the ladder instead of moving towards the administrative side?
One of my gifts is I'm really, really competitive. One of my weaknesses is that I'm really, really competitive. And at the time when I was coaching, I was 23, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. I cared more about winning and success than a lot of the student athletes I was coaching, which I found very frustrating. They didn't have the same commitment to it. And I found a lot of times that I was frustrated in that process. I wasn't mature. I wasn't a master coach like some of the coaches I have right now. And I thought about it one day and I said, I need a bigger challenge than just coaching one team. Now that's an immature statement at the time, but I thought, this is frustrating for me because I'm not having the success that I thought we deserved, but I didn't put the time necessary to build something of significance. And I was an assistant AD, and then one day, and I was traveling around. I was in Nova Scotia, I was in Minnesota. I was traveling all the time, spending hours and hours in the rink, recruiting young men. And I just had this epiphany that, if I'm going to do this, I want to be in charge of everything. I want to have impact on more people's lives. And what was ironic, I went and visited my aunt. She lived in Southern California. And I was doing the backstroke on Christmas Day in the Pacific Ocean. And it was 80 degrees. And I was spending time in upstate New York freezing my butt off. And I said, that's it. I'm not shoveling another inch of snow as long as I live. So I applied for a job as the athletic director at Mills College, which was a women's college, Division III. They offered me the job, and I packed everything into a big old truck and just moved across country because I wanted to live in California. Now, all of my macho hockey coaching friends thought I had lost my mind. Why would I want to be an athletic director at a Division III school?
Right.
But I had a bigger vision, thinking I could go to a place and start a program from scratch, make a bunch of mistakes, and not get fired for it. In other words, I could hone my craft and live in California at the same time. So it was a dramatic move, but, that then got me to the University of California. So the whole thing is connected on taking risks and challenges and just making the best of the opportunity.
Right. So you're at Mills for, 5 years?
6 years.
6 years. So and then you move on to Cal. Was that kind of a natural progression for you that you had, once you got to Mills, if we're really successful, then maybe this can be a move to kind of the elite level?
Yeah, I wish I was that smart to actually figure that out. Actually, what I thought is that if I was a Division III athletic director, there's no way in heck that a major Pac-10 school would ever consider me to work there. And I always tell people you need to surround yourself with friends and colleagues that can see the gifts in you that you don't see in yourself. And the story goes, I was walking down University Ave one day, walked by the personnel office, and there was an advertisement for the Associate AD for Student Services, also in charge of football at Cal. And my best friend Tom Cordy said, you should apply for that job. I said, I can't apply for that job. They'll never hire me. I'm a Division III AD. He said, you'll be great at that job. So I applied for the job. And ironically, at the time, I didn't even own a suit, right? So I went out and bought the best suit I could afford at the time, and I wasn't making a lot of money. I was interviewed by a gentleman named Dave Maggard, who was an Olympic shot putter, big guy, and we hit it off. And I remember the day that I got out of his car, I said, Dave, I know you got a lot of great candidates here, but I promise you won't find anybody that's more loyal and will work harder than I will. And he offered me the job.
That's great.
Changed my life.
So at that point, you went from running the show at Mills to now all of a sudden you have a boss and you're part of the administrative team. Was there an adjustment period with that in mind? Because you'd kind of gone from the head honcho within the department to something else.
Well, the adjustment was I was scared to death because I didn't want to fail. But I went back to my roots, and you guys as athletes as well, it's like you go out for a team, you look around, you think everybody's better than you are. And they may be, but you go back to saying, I'm going to outwork people. So that same drive that I had when I went to college or I played sports is I'm going to work my butt off to be the best that I can. So there was a lot of fear of not wanting to fail. But as I started to do it, I realized I was good at it, and I was just happy to be there. But the longer I stayed there, I realized I can do this. And my dream was to become the athletic director. And I had opportunities to go to other schools, Division I schools, but my dream and goal in life was to be the AD at Cal. And that's a whole other story, how it didn't happen and how I ended up here at Providence College.
Right. And you've mentioned now several times how competitive you are.
Yeah.
And you've also brought up, like you just mentioned when you moved to Cal, kind of the fear of, getting that job and, being judged by your peers and the people you're working with. So for you, from a competitive standpoint, what are some of the things that drive you towards success? Some of like the root causes of that drive.
It's an interesting question. I've learned this over time, and I tell myself every day that if I'm not afraid of something I'm supposed to do during the day or have trepidation or concern about, then I'm really not doing what I'm supposed to do. In other words, I believe you have to, and we all have this anxiety about, can I do that? Will I be successful at it? Will this talk go well? Can I hire the right coach? As soon as I feel that feeling of anxiety or fear, instead of shying away from it, which most people will do, I have the need to step into it. Because when I step into it, I know that once I start the process, I will figure it out. And then once you have some success at that over a period of time, you have the confidence that even if you don't know the outcome, you've got to have the courage to step into it. And that's what I've learned is that, there's always the next level of anything in life. It could be in your marriage, it could be in your relationships, but you have to step into that fear zone and figure it out.
So kind of if you're not uncomfortable with some aspect of what you're doing, then you're probably spinning your wheels in some respect?
Yeah, well, what I say to myself, I need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. You think of courageous acts that people make, and people aren't they very courageous. Well, they're still afraid, and they're still nervous, but they have the intestinal fortitude to step in it and do what they need to do during stressful times.
Now comes a level of self-realization with that. Is that something that you've always had? Have you always been able to kind of to look at yourself in that manner, or is there kind of an evolution that goes along with that?
There's no question there's an evolution, but it starts by modeling successful people. Like I tell people all the time, success leaves clues. So when I got hired at Cal, Dave Magger was one of my heroes. He's one of my mentors. I would watch him. I would model him. I'd watch him how he spoke in front of crowds. I mean, I was scared to death to be a public speaker. And I looked at my boss and I thought, well, he can do it really, really well. I can't do that. So what do I need to do to get there? Well, it's like anything else in life. You have to practice it. So I joined Toastmasters and I worked at it. Instead of, when people asked me to speak, instead of saying, avoiding it, I said I will. And I stumbled, I crashed, I burned. I wasn't very good at it. But over years of practicing and being willing to step into it, you develop the skill set. I wouldn't be sitting here today if I wasn't watching guys and women who had skill sets I didn't have and try to model those behaviors.
Interesting. Now that could tie into the athletic piece too. I know you've come across this point, thousands, almost 100,000 of athletes in your time at wherever school you were, and you have that feeling of, as an athlete, of I need to get better. However, you also have that kind of that paradoxical piece of you don't want to just focus on your weaknesses. You want to amplify your strengths. So how do you deal with that sort of paradox?
Well, that's an interesting question. And I have a life's coach that I've been working with. He's 82 years old, and I talk to him once a week. He's learned a lot more about life than I have at 63. And we talk a lot about focusing on your gifts. You have a gift, Matt, all right? You're very talented at what you're doing right here. No, you are. I mean, just like Chris is really talented at what he, those are your gifts. You guys are in alignment with what you were meant to be. What I coach people on and what I coach myself on, we were born with these gifts, the things that you naturally want to do. And it's part of why you're good at it. And then you do it more. It's like that 10,000-hour rule. So what I try to figure out is forget the things that you're average at to make them good. Figure out the one or two or three things that are your God-given gifts and make them phenomenal. So live in that zone. So me as an athletic director, my gift is giving energy to people, giving vision to people, to giving hope to people, to giving belief that we can be great. Well, I can't do it sitting behind that desk over there on my phone or email. I need to be out in the space, face-to-face, having conversations with people. So I have to remind myself every day, get out of the office, get into other people's world. So it's about figuring out what your gifts are and shining a light on them and practice them every day so you become great at them.
So that goes into your role here at PC. Do you have, you mentioned what you're best at and the best way of doing it. Is there a typical day for you, say during the school year? Like how would you, say you get here whatever time, how would you progress through a typical day?
Well, my day starts long before I get here, right? I try to get enough rest and exercise so my physical being has the energy to do what I need to do and get up and, I meditate, I pray, I have a vision for the day. I think purposely of what I want to do. I have cards that I write my action steps on. I try to be strategic. I try to think about focusing on the high priority tasks, right? I try to get in the office with energy around it. And then so I have a plan. And I have to keep looking back at the plan. But what happens is it gets disrupted during the day, right? Mm-hmm. So there's an emergency or somebody comes in and needs this. So I have to be flexible. I have to wear the day like a loose-fitting coat and be okay with the direction that it goes through. Every day is different. That's what I love about my job, right? Every day is different. I love that. I love game days when we're going down the dunk, right, Chris? And he's got the videos going. There's 10,000 people in the crowd, and there's energy and buzz around that. But then how do you create the energy when it's not game day? That's what we say every day is game day, right? How do you come to work now when there's no games going on, but yet still have the same passion and energy around it, right? So it's purposefully trying to achieve the vision of most respected, 100% graduation, and competing for championships. So
the morning rituals that you have, from the exercise, the meditation, laying out your goals and things that you want to prioritize. Obviously, you travel for your work. Have you noticed your daily output go down or your attitude throughout the day kind of deteriorate if you're not able to do those things?
Oh yeah, if I don't get the rest I need and I don't get my exercise and I don't eat well and I don't take time to plan and really control what comes at me, right, to kind of be purposefully in the moment, then it's just stimulus response. There's so much stuff coming at you, you're just reacting. And that's not a good way to lead, right? You have to actually be present of mind and have clarity of purpose to be able to do the best you can do. And a lot of people just get up and it's just stimulus response. They eat, they go here, and they're actually walking through the day without really thinking about what they're doing, right? Mm-hmm. Not being mentally present.
Right. And you just mentioned leading. You have quite a group of leaders here. Actually, we're in Bob's conference room right now, and all the coaches are across the walls. 3 in particular have had extreme success at PC. Ray Tracy with the running program, the cross-country team, and the track team. Nate Lehman with men's ice hockey, and Ed Cooley with men's basketball. And for people who follow PC athletics, those are 3 individuals. While they have the success in common, there aren't a lot of other things in common with those 3. So could you just break down, when you look at these individuals, you analyze them, that's a big part of your job. What are some of the underlying themes or the connection points with the success coming from those individuals as coaches and mentors?
Right. Really good question. If there was some kind of checklist, we'd hire great coaches all the time. For me, I get attracted to energy, right? So I want to be around somebody that when I'm engaged with them, they raise my spirit, my energy, my vision of what's possible. All 3 of those guys have that in different ways. Like Ed will walk into a room and Ed will light the room up. Ray will walk into a room, he'll light it up in a different kind of way, a sense of confidence, how he carries himself. I mean, Ray's arguably one of the greatest coaches in the world. Right? But the consistency that I see between high performers, and I call them architects for success, is number 1, they're driven to be great. right? Remember I talked about competitive? These guys are really competitive. They're hardwired that way. Number two, they have a clearly defined plan or vision to how to sustain that. I'm sure if you asked them, they would have similar conversations about their routine and what they do. Number three, they're unbelievably hard workers, right? Ray Tracy works 24/7, 12 months a year, right? Even after he wins the national championship, he's in here the next day. So they're high performers because they're driven and they really work really hard. The other thing I will say is they're constant learners, right? A lot of people get to a level of success and they keep doing the same thing over and over again, but the variables change. It's like, how do you continue to do a self-audit of what's the next level of it and keep having these, what I call conversations of possibility? How do you create something that doesn't exist, right? You have to create new patterns and ways of doing things. These men, and we've got great women's coaches as well, continue to try to reinvent themselves so that they can continue to have the success of doing it. And they're sustainable. They can do it. And you look at Nate, and the other thing I'll say is the best indication of what somebody's going to be like in the future is kind of what they're like in the past, right? I mean, it's consistent throughout their life.
Right. Which brings to the point of trying to have as many of those people on your staff as possible. However, if they're not an internal hire, how do you go about evaluating these individuals before they get here for, say, those 4 different metrics that you just laid out?
Well, what I've learned, it's about fit. When I first came here, I hired some people from California and different parts of the country, and they came here, and they just didn't fit. You know, they might have been in a big school like Cal, and they come to a small school like that. They don't have the same infrastructure and support system, and they don't really survive. They have to be a jack of all trades, right? You mentioned early on that I came from a small school. Well, I did. So when I ran the summer programs, I painted the pools, I cut the lawns, I marked the cross-country fields. I mean, I had to learn from the ground up. Now, if you come from a big school, you've never done that stuff, you have people to do it, and all of a sudden you come to a place like Cal, and there's not a lot of people to do that stuff, and you can't do it on your own,
right?
You will sink. So for me, the most important thing is, will they fit into the culture that we have created, right? Do they believe in mutual respect, integrity, honesty, effort, constant improvement? Do they believe in the concept that sport is a way to teach the students the core values of life? It's not just about winning games. A lot of teams win games, but they cheat, they lie, they steal, they do whatever they can, and then the society says, well, they won, so they're great. No, you haven't done it with character. So I have to have people that buy into the concept that it's an educational process and you're just using sport to teach those values.
So when you're asking the questions that lead into that during the interview process, how do you kind of get to the point where you can take their answers for their true opinion of these topics and not just kind of like the PR version of their topics, right? How do you really drill down to the point where you get a really good sense of who they are and what they're capable of doing, as opposed to, you know, the highly varnished cover letter version of what anyone would say to some of those questions?
It comes through years of actually building relationships with people. It's the same thing you do when you meet somebody the first time. I want to know what makes them tick. I want to know about their family. I want to know how they grew up. I'll ask them, tell me something that you've done in your life that you're really, really proud of. That you really was real. Tell me something that you reached for and you crashed and burned. And how did you respond to the bad things in your life? Because the indication of somebody's character is not when things are going well, it's when things go bad. I want to hear about your struggles. I want to know how you came through those. I want to know what you stand for, what makes you tick, what's your life's purpose. Like if you can't articulate to me is, why do you do what you do? And I'll ask that of every recruit. I'll say, I had a young lady in there yesterday. I said, why do you play hockey? What do you love about hockey? If they can't articulate that, then they're not connected to what they do. And then for me, it's a gut feel, right? I mean, you know instantaneously, I do, within the first 2 minutes of meeting or having a conversation with somebody, whether there's a fit or not. I'll give you an example. We were just hiring for the women's basketball job. Jill and I were up in Boston. We interviewed 7 people in a private suite. And it was going well. And then in between interviews, I went downstairs to have lunch. And I was sitting there. Jim Crowley walks over, and he was sitting over there, introduced himself to me. And And he said, I'm sorry about interrupting your lunch. And I said, no, I really appreciate you coming over and saying hello. And I said, sit down, let's have lunch. We sat there for an hour having lunch, and that conversation was when I knew I was going to hire him. Long before I got upstairs and actually went through the X's and O's and everything else, because there was a fit, there's a connection, there's a philosophical similarity, right? Mm-hmm. That happened. That's why when I interview people, I usually take people out to dinner or lunch. It's a relaxing time frame. So for me, it's about do I admire, like, and respect them? Do I want to be around them? Do I want to take them to dinner? Do I respect them as a man or a woman? So those are the things I look for.
Well, that's great, and obviously it's worked out. Some of the recent successes you've had, I don't want to go through the full list because we'd be here for the next hour, and this would be the most boring podcast in the history of the Providence College podcast. But just very recently, 2012, women's cross country team was second in the national championships. 2013, they win it. 2014, men's basketball wins the Big East championship. Men's soccer wins the Big East championship. They go to the Final Four. 2015, men's ice hockey wins the national championship. And Emily Sisson wins the indoor and outdoor 5K national championship. At the end of that period, you're actually named the AD of the year in Division I. So just a huge amount of success recently. But as you just mentioned, that's usually the byproduct of overcoming some sort of failures. So for you, what has been a hurdle that you've cleared, that you have a lot of pride in how you handled that situation and have come out the other side better?
Well, that was 15 years in the making, right? Remember we talked about what's key to success? It's consistent behavior over a long period of time and having the mental will and toughness to get through the difficult times when a lot of people lose faith in you and so forth. And I can remember vividly, I think it was 2007 or 8 when we had that tragic event that happened with a couple of our basketball players beat up a student on campus, and it was just an awful, awful thing to go through. And it so went against all of my core values of, most respected program in the nation. And it got a lot of bad national publicity, and that was a heartbreaking moment for all of us. And I felt that personally because I was responsible for the program. And at the time, we had a different coach in the basketball program, and I just didn't have the confidence that the student athletes we were recruiting and or the values that they were living by fit what I stood for and what the college stood for. And so, we had to make some tough decisions, and morale was really down, and there was a long way up, but we had to stay positive and have the courage to make those decisions. And a lot of schools won't do that. You can look at Baylor and these other, they'll try to sweep those things under the rug, but that's not what I and Father Shanley stands for. So that was, I think, a defining moment. I'm sure my credibility as a leader was suspect on the outside. I don't think it was internally because I think my staff knows what I stand for. But to me, that was a courageous moment for all of us. And what's ironic about it, when there's a breakdown, there's an opportunity for breakthrough. Ed Cooley wouldn't be here today, and we wouldn't have the success we have today if we didn't go through that. But it's how you handle those crises. Do you point blame? Do you say it's somebody else's fault? Do you say, hey, I'm accountable, and I'll do everything I can to make it right? Now, fortunately, I have a leader in Father Shanley that believes in me and will allow people to go through challenges. And it's when you're managing a program of this magnitude on a national scale with young people, you'll have some of these issues. Every school in the country has them. But it's not that you have them, it's how you manage them. So that was a very difficult time for the program and in my life personally. I think I had 3 years I woke up every night trying to figure out how I was going to work my way through this. And there were a lot of days I didn't want to come to work because I know people were down, but I had to flip that switch and come in with energy and belief, because if my people sitting around the table see me drop my head or lose my belief, I'm going to lose them. So that goes back to that thing I talked about before, mental toughness, perseverance. And then when you come through that, you think, I can get through anything. And then, I lost my mom and my dad, and when you lose your mother and father, those are tough times, and you learn through that. And so I think as you grow in life, you're going to have challenges and difficulties, but it's not that you have challenges and difficulties. What do you learn from it, and do you have the courage and character to work through it? And that's what I think I'm most proud of.
Got it. Well, thank you for sharing that, and that brings us to where we are now, where Providence College is at the point where we've had success that has been, like I said in the intro, unrivaled in PC's history in terms of success across the board within the athletic department. So for you, that obviously must be, you must have a lot of pride in that success. But is that can't be the only way you judge your coaches, because one key injury here, one key injury there, or just things that are out of their control. So when you try to judge how your program in general is doing and the coaches specifically, what are some of the things that you consider, and what's how much weight do you put in them?
Well, it's an interesting question, because we've had success, but that doesn't guarantee future success. So I don't want anybody to feel fat and happy like we've arrived. It's great we've done that, but that's all in the past. The most important thing for me is our culture. Are we living up to our honor of being most respected? Are our student-athletes graduating? That's something I want to continue to do. I want students to be in the community. I want them to help raise money. I want them to be ambassadors. I want them to have great GPAs. I think our GPA is 3.2, which is the highest it's ever been, 91% graduation. That's most important to me. And I want to win. I want to be successful. So moving forward, we're kind of at the base of the mountain. Some of them have scaled to the top, but we need to get the others to the top of the mountain. So we're having dialogue about, so how do we do that? Well, it takes great coaches, and we've got great coaches, but it takes resources, right? We need to raise more money. We need to have basketball success so it has a trickle-down effect. But I've come to the realization that if I've got 100 full-time people, and Chris probably knows I probably got 50, 60 new people in the last 3 or 4 years. I need to reinvest my time and energy into coaching the next generation of Friars, because I'm not going to be here forever. I've got a whole mid-level group, and you guys are examples of that when we're gone, you guys need to carry the torch and continue the work we've done. And if I don't spend the time coaching the next generation about these core values and hard work and what I've learned in my 42 years of doing this, then I'm not doing my job as a teacher and mentor and coach. So my focus this year is on that, coaching my people to be the best that they can be and teach them what I know. Because if more people are carrying the torch in the same way, there's power in numbers. And I think we're seeing this, Matt, right on the campus. You see this, the thing is starting to spread across campus, and the campus is getting better, and the business school is going. And look, there's an energy around that because everybody's kind of pulling in the same direction and living by the same code.
Yeah, it is. It is all correlated. Especially for kids who may not have a professional athletic career. For them, the quality of the athletic department, while critical in their recruitment, isn't the sole motivator in their decision. So you mentioned the business school, and also in regards to resource allocation and improving the amount of resources at your disposal and at your coach's disposal. We've had a lot of upgrades: Schneider Arena, Carlin Carey Anderson Stadium, and Chappie Field. We have the Ray Tracy track. We also have upcoming the Rowan Fire Development Center as well. Outside of the obvious, hey, it's nice to play in a new arena, it's nice to have a new locker room and things like that, and the obvious benefits for recruitment, how did these have a bigger impact on the school at large in terms of the future of PC success and just the future of the school?
Well, I tell people all the time, you have one chance to make a first impression, right? You walk into Disneyland and it's a big-time kind of place, right? And it wasn't always that way here. So I want people to walk on this campus and have this wow factor. I think we're starting to get that, right? Because you want to be part of something bigger than yourself. So the goal for me, at least in athletics, is to continue to grow that and make it the best at our level in the country, because it really doesn't stop. I mean, maybe the next thing is we put a bubble on a facility so you can actually play year-round. Can we raise the money to fully fund the program so there's the right number of scholarships in all of our programs? Do we add staffing to support the coaches so they can have more success? So it really never ends. You endow positions so that the college doesn't have to pay for coaching positions. So there's always the next iteration in it. But I've always wanted us to be the model program. Small, like I tell people all the time, pound per pound, we have the best student athletes and the best fans in the country, right? It's like a boxer. You may not be the heavyweight against the Syracuse and those guys, but pound for pound, we're the toughest, we're the best, we're the baddest, and I want us to be a shining star. And I think athletics, when it has success, it has national and international impact on the branding of the institution.
Right. So what are some roadblocks to that success?
the roadblock is the challenges out there is making sure that the Big East as we know it continues to keep a long-term contract with Fox Sports, so we generate the money for that we keep our relationship with Madison Square Garden, so we keep that, that we continue our fundraising at an elite level. One of the threats is if the stock market crashes, and we raised $6.2 million this year. We've raised probably $50 million in the last 10 years, specifically for athletics. If the stock market crashes, people may not give as much. There's a lot of challenges out there. You don't want to lose your best coaches. We just signed Nate and Ed to long-term contracts. You've got to sustain your best coaches, and you have to educate your student athletes to continue to make sure they make the right decisions, because I talked about that issue in 2007. We can't have that happen. All this goodwill and morale and happy feelings we have about that, it can go away like that if somebody makes an ill-informed decision. So my job and our job is to continue to educate 18 to 22-year-olds about making responsible decisions. And they're going through changes in their life. People make bad choices at that point. But the problem with a student-athlete, when you're on the front page, you make a bad choice, it doesn't just impact you. It impacts everybody.
Right.
So that's a threat, right? So
absolutely.
We got to educate kids to do that and make sure we recruit the right student-athletes and they're making the best educated decisions they can in their personal lives.
That's great. Well, thank you for everything you're doing, Bob. You're obviously doing incredible work. Is there anything you want to say before we get going?
Well, I appreciate you two guys as teammates. I mean, the fact you have this vision and passion to do this is phenomenal, so thank you. I remember Chris was a GA, and now he's doing amazing things on this campus, and this is an example of what people do when they find their passion and niche. So I just want to thank you guys personally, and I'm just thrilled to be a Friar.
All right. Thank you very much.
For Friars.
Thank you for listening to the Providence College podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please subscribe to the podcast and share it with members of the Friar family. Also, please rate and review the show. This is the centennial year here at Providence College. We hope you can make it back to campus and attend one of the numerous events we're having regionally and nationally. You can learn more about the centennial on our website, which is providence.edu/centennial. You can follow me on Twitter at Matt Chittim, that's MattChittim, and Providence College at Providence COL. If you have any suggestions for this show or comments, please email us at podcast@providence.edu. Thanks for listening, and go Friars.